Disclaimer: this story is a work of complete fiction. You might assume that, given my profession, I would be one for discretion. Well, you'd be right, and I am. But it's no fun if you always play it safe, at least for me. So let's have a little fun, shall we? Let me tell you a story. Our world is one of constant change and obfuscation. Some seem to have a sense of this, at least more than they once did, but still far less than you'd imagine. Well, I didn't have to imagine in my situation. I learned firsthand, even about that. You see, I've gotten to see some of the most utterly astounding things one can be witness to. I've got a front row seat to the whole affair. Trust me on that. Well, at least for the moment, I've got a front row seat at least. The trust part I'll leave up to you. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. From the dawn of time, humans have always wanted to know things. It's in our nature. But few ever consider that knowledge may sometimes complicate things, even to the point of danger. Consider for a moment the things you desire to know, most of all. Maybe you'd be curious to know what people you know might say about you when you aren't around to observe them. Personally, I find this to be an extremely interesting thought experiment, for reasons I'll soon explain. Even if you aren't particularly interested in such a thing, aren't you at least a bit curious? I'd be extremely surprised if you weren't, and even more surprised if you were offered the opportunity and still weren't interested. What am I hemming and hawing about? You're probably wondering. There's a 71% chance that by now, a thought similar to that is popping into your head right now. Don't worry, friend. You'll know soon enough. That knowledge thing I mentioned earlier, consider how you would use such information, the knowledge of knowing what, if any, kinds of things those you knew said about you behind your back. One's use of knowledge says a lot about them. If the things those around you said weren't particularly to your liking, what would you do? Would you try to improve your relationships with them? Try to be a better person? Or would you try to use what they said and did against them? Furthermore, how would you go about it? Would you consider that, as you acted upon this newfound knowledge, that you would arouse the suspicion of the person in question? What would you do to avoid such an outcome while still accomplishing your objective? Yes, I know that by now, there's a 54% chance my rambling is beginning to bore you. Well, no worries, friend. I'm cutting to the chase right now. God forbid you'd think me boring, as I'm a bit of a narcissist, as my kind of employment tends to attract. Ah yes, my employment. What wholesome work it is. The national security of the United States. Sounds important, doesn't it? Sounds like it requires some pretty smart people, right? Well, I'm nothing if not important, and definitely pretty smart. And an 81% chance I'm smarter than you. So, with this above-average intelligence of mine, let me tell you about how the world works. I mean, really works. Not how your teacher in grade school told you it works, or your university professor, or even your parents. Well, out of all those folks, your parents were most likely to tell you what I'm about to tell you. But still, more than likely they didn't. If they loved you at all, they would try, to some degree, to spare you and your precious sensibilities. That truth, that reality your parents likely were hesitant to discuss with you, is the following crude summary. Nice folks finish last, the weak perish, the nice are crushed, and those with feelings always get them hurt or killed. Period. We all want what we want, and want to obtain that which we want. So if anybody's going to get what they want, it ought to be us individuals, right? There's no greater power than knowledge, and absolute knowledge is the key to absolute power. No one but people like me are more familiar with these sorts of inconvenient truths. And no organizations better understand these things than my employer. Who is my employer? Wouldn't you like to know? There's a 94% chance by now you're utterly craving to know the answer to that tantalizing question. Why all these percentages, you wonder? There's a 97% chance you're thinking that. Well, there's a 100% chance that both me and my employer are quite interested in such things. Some of the smarter ones among you have already narrowed down the possible employers I might have. You might guess that I work in investments, statistics, or maybe even the government. Yes, I work in the government. I won't tell you what agency, not that you've heard of it before. In fact, that's the point. There's a 98% chance you haven't heard of it before. It's not the usual suspects, FBI, CIA, or even NSA. You see, friend, someone has to watch those aforementioned agencies to make sure the naughty ones who work there stay high up enough on the nice list to not draw our attention. Who's we? I'll tell you, over time, depending on how things work out. You can probably imagine how amazed I was when I ended up there. This mysterious government agency I only partially speak of, because I had never been one for prestige. Rather, I've often been bullied and mistreated. The irony, of course, is that such experiences tend to attract such people to these kind of organizations like mine, those whose deeply ingrained bitterness lurks in their hearts, creating ruthlessness which my employer hopes will overcome our enemies. It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, friend, as a courteous warning, watch yourself. You can quickly get on our bad side before you even know what happened. And anything could happen, any sort of unfortunate accident, the papers will call it. If you're still insisting on boredom at this point, quite frankly, fuck off. You're done for anyway. You're better off grease frying that gray lumped brain of yours in a McDonald's grease fryer by watching TikTok. The exact kind of imbecile we love, who we never have to worry about. As I was saying, to those of you with greater sophistication than a fruit fly, my employer and I love numbers. Numbers are everything. Cold, factual, real, and brutal. You can imagine the contribution to my already impressively sized ego when they told me that I beat the odds when offered employment by them. But alas, it wasn't as simple or direct as that, although it was a good start. They polygraph the ever-loving shit out of you in government jobs like mine, especially ones like mine. Seems like every fucking day they'd call me in to wire me up like a Christmas tree. Those fuckers. Sometimes, if I thought they weren't paying close attention, I'd subtly hyperventilate to make the polygraph machine go haywire and make my body's electrical readings impossible to decipher. Eventually, they grew wise to it and told me to cut the shit or I'd be out, and I was getting interested. So I did indeed cut the shit. It was getting good, you know. They were about to show me the good stuff. Oh boy, the good stuff. All those numbers I've told you, and more. Oh, so much more. I watched and observed practically everyone and everything, all the time, from the comfort of my computer screen. The most incredible and unfathomable technology, gathering information the likes of which only God can conceive. Collectively, me and my colleagues operate under the massive and opaque umbrella known as information operations. Yes, that is quite the government Orwellian newspeak, isn't it? Well, it's simply wonderful for us, that is. While AI has come a long way to make our job easier, it's not complete yet. It still requires human participation to a fairly significant degree. Just as the scope of our information sweep was galactically broad, so were our missions.